Hey everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo. Contrary to the length of the movie we'll be talking about today, this review is going to be pretty short because I think we're going to be talking a lot more about Killers of the Flower Moon in future videos when I talk about the Oscars on our show Picture This, because this is going to get a Best Picture nomination. Let's not kid ourselves. But I did want to at least get my brief thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon out there, Martin Scorsese's newest film. It is 3.5 hours long, as I alluded to earlier. The length is very long. But one thing I want to say right now, I want to pull up a Roger Ebert quote that I found. No good movie is too long, and no bad movie is short enough. And I couldn't agree more. And in the case of Killers of the Flower Moon, if it's a good movie, it can be however long it needs to be. If the audience is engaged and cares about the characters and wants to see what's going to happen and is scared for what's going to happen to some of these characters and wants to see what characters are going to get the blame and the downfall for it, that's what Killers of the Flower Moon is. Yes, it's 3.5 hours, but I think the whole 3.5 hours really is engaging to where you care about these characters, want to see what happens to them, especially with Lily Gladstone's character. She is just a revelation in this film. I mean, the film itself, it's hard to kind of go into detail the entire plot because it is 3.5 hours, but the basic gist of it is that it is focused on 1920s Oklahoma. The Osage people become incredibly rich after striking oil in Oklahoma, and you start to see how these white opportunists basically take advantage of these indigenous people and kind of exploit them and kind of poison them basically in order to inherit their money, inherit their land. It's very haunting, but I think this is right in Scorsese's wheelhouse from a crime perspective because he has made some of the best crime films of all time. And I'm not just talking gangster films, but I'm talking stuff like Gangs of New York, Taxi Driver, and then also the gangster films, Goodfellas, Casino, The Irishman. What I love so much is that he's able to really show off his abilities as a crime director, but he's able to tell it in such a different way than Goodfellas, for example, where Goodfellas, I feel like, romanticizes the idea of mobster culture. Obviously, Martin Scorsese's not trying to romanticize the mafia in those films, but the characters in his films are romanticizing this idea. Mobster culture was an exciting thing, something to be almost marveling at, and oh my God, how are these people operating? Oh, what's going to happen next? The fact that anyone can get killed at any moment, there was almost a thrill to it. Whereas here in Killers of the Flower Moon, I feel like maybe it's because of Scorsese's age and the amount of time he's had to reflect on his career at large, especially with this and The Irishman, which was his latest very long film from a few years ago and my particular favorite film of Scorsese's. Yep, that's a hot take. Mark it down. But I think he's started to find the darkness and the almost tragedy behind mobster culture, or at least crime in general and crime stories, to where, yes, he can tell a really invigorating story like Goodfellas or The Wolf of Wall Street that kind of almost romanticizes it and then also criticizes it by romanticizing, but then you can also criticize it by just letting it play out and kind of just being with these characters and letting things just kind of unfold naturally. And that's why I really love the length of this thing, because you can feel it almost in real time unfolding before your eyes. And I think every single minute matters. And honestly, because we get a little less Osage perspective than I would have liked to. Obviously, Lily Gladstone's character is the main perspective there, but I would have liked to see even more of their perspective because a lot of it is from Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro's minds, which is an interesting choice, obviously, because Martin Scorsese himself is a white director, which we'll talk about in just a sec. But Lily Gladstone, I would have liked a little bit more of her character's perspective to where I could have had an hour more of this. I really do think pacing is more important than runtime. And I think if a movie is paced well, and I'm not saying paced fast, because this is not a fast-paced movie, but paced efficiently and well, I think that's what matters. And I think that's why this is a success. That's why The Irishman was a success, because they felt like the right paced movies for the stories they were telling. Now, like I said earlier, a lot of it is from the perspective of Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who marries Lily Gladstone's character at first because he really does love her, but then as their relationship progresses, he kind of gets the bug that his uncle Robert De Niro's character gets, where he starts to become obsessed with the idea of taking over the inheritance and basically, exploiting his wife for his own benefits. And you start to see how he slowly tries to kill off everyone around her and then ultimately try to get her out of the picture. And I think the reason for having so much perspective focused on them is because I think Scorsese's trying to shine a light on these white opportunists who I will say are white supremacists. They literally talk about the supreme race of whiteness, and we quite literally see KKK parades in the background of some scenes. I think he wants to draw attention to that, to say to some of the audience members, hold up a mirror to some of the audience members and say, yo, this is not right, and this is still happening in our freaking world, in our freaking country, and this is not right. I think there's a reason for that, but also I think the idea that he is a white filmmaker, I think there are some criticisms to be made that maybe he's not the ideal person to tell this story, or he should not be the only person to tell this story. But the thing is, at the end of the film, he acknowledges that. And I thought that was just such a bold and responsible and mature way of addressing criticisms in the movie itself, and have the film ending with basically Martin Scorsese telling the audience that maybe he's not the best person to tell the story, but he needed to tell the story for one way or another. And he hopes that these stories continue on because, you know, in the grand overall scheme of culture and media, it's not shed enough light on. There's not enough light shed on these things, on these murders, on these people, on the Osage people. And while, yes, you could have had maybe a few more Osage people behind the camera on the writing team, and I think there was an effort made to at least consult with them, I think Martin Scorsese at least understands that and is willing to reckon with that, and basically saying, I know I'm not the right person to tell this story, but I'm telling it anyway, and I hope it inspires more people to check out the actual authentic stories from the Osage people themselves. So I thought that was a very mature, bold way to end the film. And I'm not going to say how he does it, but he does address the audience in that way, in one way or another. And that's why, yes, I agree we should have seen more of the Osage perspective in general. And I would love to see a movie made by the Osage people on the same topic from a different perspective. But I also understand why Scorsese made the film regardless, and what he has to say about it, even if he's not the ideal person. I think it's a very interesting conversation to have. And I think I totally see it both ways. I see the people who are criticizing it because of that, though I would implore people to watch at least the last 5 minutes because I think it is addressed. And I understand people who love the film regardless. And I also like this film regardless. I like it a lot. Is it one of my favorite Scorsese films? Only because I think the other ones just have some more spark to them. Maybe not, but it's still a really solid film. I mean, it's Scorsese. He is a master at what he does. And I think everything he does is so deliberate, so effective. I think the performances are great. I've said her name a lot, but Lily Gladstone is a real revelation in this film. She is going to be a lot of people's highlights, but my actual highlight was Robert De Niro, only because I haven't seen a performance like this from him. Yes, he has darkness in The Irishman and Taxi Driver and Casino and Goodfellas, you know, all these films. But in this film specifically, it is darkness that is masked by such an affable nature that it's almost harrowing and scary. Like, this is his scariest performance since Taxi Driver, where I'm quite literally frightened watching him because he seems so friendly, so personable, and that's what's scary about him. And I think it's just one of those amazing late career performances from one of our greatest actors. Again, the De Niro and Scorsese combo, as well as the DiCaprio Scorsese combo, is really, really awesome. But I do think Lily Gladstone and Robert De Niro are the shining stars of this thing. There are other great performances as well. Leonardo DiCaprio is great. I think he's been so great, so consistently, so recently, that it's no surprise that he's great, which makes it almost a little bit whelming. I didn't feel like I left the theater being like, oh my God, Leo was amazing, because I knew he would be, you know what I mean? Whereas De Niro was more of a surprise. I haven't seen Gladstone in much, so it was also a fun surprise. I will say there's some performances I didn't love. I mean, Jesse Plemons is great, but also I think he comes in so late. I think his character itself is supposed to be a little bit more reserved, so I wish we just had gotten a little bit more of him. Again, I could have had another hour of this with a little bit more of Jesse Plemons' character. I don't know. And then Brendan Fraser, say what you will about him in The Whale. It's a great performance, but ooh, I don't know if I love this performance. And I know Scorsese has backed this one up, saying like he wanted it to be a very loud, in-your-face performance. It's just me personally. I didn't dig it. But hey, things are divisive all the time. And Killers of the Flower Moon, while there are performances that I liked more than others, I think the overall film is one that is just so well crafted, so well made, so well paced. Thelma Schoonmaker and Martin Scorsese, what an amazing duo. She is the editor for most of his films, and she continues to edit his films so well. There are sequences that people have said could be edited down. I mean, they could be, but the fact that they're long doesn't necessarily make me like it. any less. Like, I'm fine with the length they are. I had a really good theatrical experience too. There are surprisingly some funny moments here too. And that's not to say that this is stuff we should be laughing at, the subject matter, but by nature of how these characters are, at often their expense at making them look stupid, at least the white characters in this film, there's some good comedy. I mean, this is also a romance in a way of Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone's characters kind of coming together. So there's going to be a little bit of that back and forth that is charming before the sinister stuff starts to creep in. And I think that's important. When you have 4 hours to tell, you can afford to have a few jokes. I don't think that's necessarily a negative. But I really like this movie, and I hope people check it out when it hits Apple. Or if you were fortunate enough to get it in a theater, go see it in a theater, because I also think the sound design is great. I love the score. I love the way they use the Native American instruments in this thing. I think it's very well shot, very beautiful. It's just a great film. So I highly recommend it. I wanted to get a review out for it, but I do know I'll be talking about it more, so I'm sure we'll go in depth with future videos. But thank you so much for watching. And if you've checked out Killers of the Flower Moon, or you're going to, let me know in the comments down below. I don't know why I'm pointing to this side, because that's normally what it is for TikTok. It's down there in the comments below. And check out other videos. This whole past 2 weeks, I've been posting videos for stuff like The Holdovers, my New York Film Fest recap, Hunger Games, all these things as I'm on vacation. So that's why you're getting this a month later than the release, because I wanted to have some videos to fill this last void of November. So thank you so much for watching this one, and stay tuned for other reviews, and check out the other reviews posted the past few weeks, and stay tuned for more fun coming up in December and the whole year of 2024. It's going to be an exciting year. I can't believe we're almost at the end of this year. It's quite wild how fast everything flew by. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.